Hey guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about seed potatoes and give you a few tips on seed potatoes, how to source them, what types of potatoes can you plant and when to plant them, and just a few tips on overall on planting potatoes, because for a lot of us it is actually time to plant those potatoes either right now or very soon, okay? So let's see here. Let me just get started by talking about when you'll want to plant potatoes, okay? You can usually plant your potatoes about 4 weeks before your last frost date. So I'm in zone 7, East Tennessee. That for us, that is right now. We're actually having a little cold snap where it's going to be quite cold out the next few nights, down to 26 or 27, so I would not advise planting them right now, but this weekend would be the perfect time to get those potatoes in the ground. I actually planted mine about 3 weeks ago, and this cold snap has kind of killed back the tops of them a little bit because it did get pretty cold out the last few nights, but I'm pretty confident that they will just sprout some more. There's more sprouts that are growing underneath the soil, so I'm pretty sure they'll be fine because they were just beginning to even break through the soil anyway. So I'm going to just leave mine, see what happens. I planted mine 3 weeks early, earlier than I usually do. Usually I would be planting mine right now. My phone actually just reminded me yesterday it is time to plant potatoes. So yeah, so right now it's about the time to plant potatoes if you're in zone 7. If you're in zone 8, you could have already planted your potatoes probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, depending on where you live. If you live in zone 6, you've got a few weeks, and so on and so forth. If you live in zone 5, probably got 6 or 8 weeks before you'll be planting potatoes. But just so you know, whatever your last frost date is, about 4 weeks before that is when you can actually get these seed potatoes into the ground, okay? If you're going to be using potatoes that you already have as your seed potatoes, you're going to want to prep those a few weeks before you plan on planting, okay, if they're not already sprouted. In my case, the potatoes that I had saved from my fall harvest, they had already sprouted, okay? So they're ready to pop in the ground just whenever. But if yours are not already sprouted, they're not already looking like this, you're going to need to encourage that. You're probably going to want to bring them out. If you have them in a dark storage, you're going to want them to have a little bit of access to light, a little bit of moisture, and a little bit warmer temperatures, and that should trigger them and get them started. Don't want it to be super warm because it'll just rot, but like 45, 50 degrees, that should be enough to get these guys encouraged to start some sprouts. And they don't have to have sprouts on them that are this long in order to plant them. Sometimes you're going to have some eyes that you can just barely even tell, maybe more like that. Or even if I turn this around, there's one right there that will eventually grow too. So it doesn't have to have these huge sprouts, even though that is great if it does, but it does not have to be. So like I said, I'm actually using potatoes from my fall harvest, and my trick that I do so that I can just maximize all the potatoes that I have harvested is all these tiny little potatoes like that you just come across when you're harvesting your own potatoes. I purposely save those in a separate container for those to be my seed potatoes, okay? And you may think, oh, that's a tiny potato. It's not going to grow a lot of potatoes, right? You should use a big potato. It's not about the size of the potato. It's just about this sprout is going to turn into a plant, okay? So the size of it's not going to matter. I've done this several seasons and it has always worked well, and I get a great potato harvest from it. So if you want to maximize your potato harvest, harvest those tiny little potatoes, and instead of painstakingly trying to peel them or cook them or do something with them, put them aside, save those as your seed potatoes. So like I said, the ones I'm planting, they have come from mine, but you do not have to have your own stock in order to plant potatoes. You can go buy potatoes from the store and allow those to sprout. We've all had potatoes show up, in our at the bottom of our potato bin that, they look like this. If you have some of those, hey, you can totally plant those. If you don't have any, go to the store, buy some potatoes. I would recommend buying organic ones if you know ahead of time that you're wanting to plant those. and then just wait for them to sprout. And that's what I mean by, if you don't have this happening already, you're going to want to go ahead and buy those potatoes, those bags, way ahead of time, and then encourage them to sprout by maybe exposing them some little warmer temperatures, some sunlight, whatever you need to do to get those to start sprouting initially. So, and you can also buy certified seed potatoes, which is going to be, if you're just beginning, that's going to be the best method, but I know how expensive those can be. For a tiny bag of certified seed potatoes, it can be, $10 versus just buying a bag of organic potatoes and sprouting them yourself. That might only be $4 or $5. So if you have the extra money and you want to really start out on the right foot, you can buy, order certified seed potatoes from Seed Potato Stock. They're going to be less likely to have any disease. They're just going to come from better stock. And as far as just if this is something you want to do long term, it's going to be a great investment for you to just initially start out with those great seed potatoes, and they'll come like this. If you're buying seed potatoes, it's going to look like a potato. It'll have eyes on it. And then each one of these eyes, like I said a moment ago, that has the potential to be, even these right here, they're a little bitty. Each one of those has the potential to be its own plant. So if you can either plant this entire potato in the ground, going to have great results if you do that, or you can cut this up and quarter it up into a couple of pieces so that each one of these eyes is on a chunk of potato. And I'll show you here where I've already done that with this potato. Cut it up. This chunk has an eye. That chunk has an eye. These chunks have an eye, okay? So I've already done that with a potato. You just slice it up. You would like to keep, a decent amount of potato with each eye. And once you have done that, you're going to want to let this sit out and air dry for a couple of days until it's no longer wet and smushy feeling. It'll feel dry, leathery. It's going to seal itself up. That's recommended that you do that before you plant this in the ground, because once it seals itself up, it's going to protect this future potato plant from bacteria or disease or anything from the soil affecting that plant as much, okay? So if you decide to cut it up, just remember to let this sit out and air dry until this part feels dry and leathery, and then you can plant those, okay? It's also important to know, I think it is important to know, if the potato varieties that you are going to be planting are determinate or indeterminate varieties of potatoes. You may have heard that term before with tomatoes. Potatoes are going to be, it's a similar idea. Indeterminate means this potato plant is going to continue to grow up, and potatoes are going to keep growing off the sides of it as it grows up. That is indeterminate. Determinate varieties of potatoes are only going to grow potatoes just from one level of the potato plant. The difference that this makes when you're planting is going to, if you plant determinate varieties, they're not going to need to be healed. So I think a lot of home gardeners, they never look into this, and they go out and they just do all this extra work healing up potatoes 2 or 3 times, and there's just no need in it. Because wherever I plant this, if it is a determinate variety of potato, wherever I plant this in the soil, potatoes are going to grow out from this part of the root base. There will be potatoes attached to it. The rest of the plant will just grow straight up. There will not be potatoes in the other parts of the soil up here. The potatoes will only form at the bottom base of this potato plant for a determinate variety. If I plant an indeterminate variety, which are really, there's not a lot of those varieties, and they are mainly commercially planted, so you're not going to find a lot of these available for home gardeners. So I don't know when the misinterpretation of healing up planted potatoes came from, other than just market gardeners that were actually growing, and they were growing those commercial varieties a long time ago. And so it got started this thing that you have to heal potatoes, but you do not usually. Most of your more readily available varieties that you're going to buy at your garden center, those are going to be determinate varieties. You can look those up. If you plant the determinate variety, you do not have to heal them up. With an indeterminate variety, which is going to be few and far in between, if I plant this potato here and it starts to grow up, it is going to grow potatoes all between. So let's say the top of the soil is here, this is the bottom. Not only will it grow potatoes here, it'll also grow potatoes here and here and here, all the way up to the top of the soil. And that is when healing potatoes becomes necessary, because as you heal up more dirt, that's another layer of potatoes that are going to come off of the main kind of stem here and grow, okay? And so if you don't heal up your potatoes, you're going to get less of a crop. So just do a little bit of homework whenever you figure out what varieties you want to plant. And if you're going to get a bigger harvest from an indeterminate variety, those may be harder to find initially as a seed potato, because from what research I've done, most of the potatoes available in my area as seed potatoes are determinate varieties, okay? I actually have a video on how to plant your potatoes, and I will link that right here so that I don't have to go through all that again, because my potatoes are actually already planted. But when you're planting potatoes, I'll just give you the basics. You're going to want to dig, you're going to want to have loose, well-draining soil that is at least loosened up at least 12 inches, because you're going to want your potatoes to not have resistance as they grow. And you're going to want to take your potato like this and dig a hole or a trench if you're planting them in a trench. I plant mine in raised beds, so instead I just dig holes. But you're going to want to plant these down in a trench or a hole at least 8 inches deep. That would be my about recommended space to put them in. You're going to want the sprouted side to be up so it can grow up towards the sun. Plant that in your hole and then just cover it up. If you want to put some compost or fertilizer in there with it, you can do that as well. Cover it up and then just wait. And before long, you will see your sprout beginning to grow from the top. Potatoes, most varieties take around 100 to 110 days to be ready to harvest, to have those large baking potatoes that you're going to want. But you can harvest from the sides of the potato plant and pick out the smaller, what we would call new potatoes, at any time during the plant's growth, okay? And as your potato plant grows, once again, they take quite a while to come to harvest. So whatever day you plant them on, go ahead and count forward about 90 to 100, even 110 days out, somewhere around in there, and make yourself a reminder that that is your harvest day, and you will know that your potatoes are ready to be harvested once the plant has turned yellow and totally died back, fell over, and it looks totally dead. Even after that, I would leave my potatoes in the ground as long as you're not going to have a really wet season for at least a week or two to allow those to cure under the soil, and then you can harvest them. So those are my main tips for potatoes. If you don't have any yet that are sprouting, go ahead and grab you a bag and then start encouraging that bag of potatoes to start sprouting so that you will have your own potatoes to plant, or go ahead and put an order in, or check your local garden center for like our Tractor Supply, our Lowe's. They sell bags, our local co-op. They all have seed potatoes readily available for you to buy by the pound or by the bag, and get those in about 4 weeks before your last frost date. And that's the earliest that you can plant them. And I also, one last tip, you can plant more than one crop of potatoes in many areas, and they're pretty hardy. And while you can plant them as early as 4 weeks before your last frost, if you can't get them in the ground right then, don't worry too much. As long as you have at least 100 to 110 days in your growing season, before your growing season is over and that first frost comes, you can plant potatoes anytime in your garden. I hope this has helped you. Go out there, get you some potatoes, and get ready to plant those. You can plant potatoes in pots, in raised beds, in the ground. Potatoes are a great staple crop. They're probably one of our most important staple crops that we personally grow because we love potatoes. So don't forget to add those to your home garden this season. I hope you guys have a great day.